Get off me, please. Get off me, and he was like, don't fight me.
Mike Tyson would spend more than 3 years out of the ring, serving time in prison for rape.
They might be stopping it. That might be all, ladies and gentlemen.
Only one fighter in history has battled his way back to the top after a 3-year exile.
I don't have a mark on my face, and I upset son in this one, and I just turned 22 years old. I must be the greatest.
His name is Muhammad Ali, stripped of the title after he refused to fight in Vietnam.
You said you were the people's champion?
Yes, sir.
Do you think that you're acting like a people's champion?
Yes, sir.
Then by sheer force of personal character and technical skill, Ali battled his way back to the top of the boxing world.
I shook up the world! I shook up the world! I shook up the world!
Saturday morning, March 25th, 1995. Mike Tyson was released from prison. Now he's making his bid, an attempt to return to the boxing glory he won and lost, an attempt to battle back, not just from a defeat in the ring, but from personal disaster and disgrace. Muhammad Ali had been a brash but popular and well-known champion when he changed his name from Cassius Clay to reflect his conversion to Islam. He suddenly found himself plunged into the political arena and seemed stunned by the results.
They knew that as soon as if people began to identify with Cassius and the type of image he was creating, they were going to have trouble out of these Negroes, because they'd have Negroes walking around the streets saying, "I'm the greatest."
When he refused induction into the Army, the Vietnam War had not yet become unpopular. Ali suddenly was. The governing body of boxing stripped Ali of his heavyweight championship. For 3 years and 9 months, Ali was kept out of the ring. But on October 30th, 1974, he beat George Foreman and won it all back. When you look at Mike Tyson's life, you see a long history of coming back from adversity. In 30 years, he's fought his way out of the slums of Brownsville, Brooklyn, only to find himself once again face to face with the only fighter of his time who could hurt him, Mike Tyson himself. Now, starting anew on the comeback trail, will he succeed? Some of the answers lie in Mike Tyson's past. On June 30th, 1966, Michael Gerard Tyson was born. His parents never married, and Tyson rarely saw his father. Young Mike Tyson was physically huge, but had a high-pitched voice and a lisp. The other children in the neighborhood picked on him mercilessly, taunting him, calling him Big Head Mike.
You know, his background, where he come from was tough. He didn't have any money. He robbed food stands to eat sometimes, I would imagine, coming from that, you know, surrounding.
Eventually, his fists would bring him money and glory. But in the early days, his fists were weapons that won him survival. He probably started fighting as a matter of self-preservation as much as anything else. Perhaps it was for money or food. Perhaps it was rage born out of the teasing and taunting he'd endured.
The people that say that I'm a bad kid, they never experienced things that I experienced. They lived in two different worlds. They couldn't understand. They're yet to steal a loaf of bread. And they say, why is this kid doing it? They just can't understand.
From stealing food, Tyson graduated to muggings and robberies. He was arrested several times before he was even 12. Perhaps the real miracle of Mike Tyson's early years is that he wasn't killed before he even stepped into a ring.
We used to take, you know, radios out of cars and take cars and do everything, like living in an atmosphere like that. We used to have keys to all the hotels because we used to take them from the janitor. And we used to go in there and clean people out.
Yeah, he'd tell you about, you know, being in an elevator with an older lady and doing whatever he had to do to, you know, to take her money or to get what change he could get from her.
Jail was inevitable. The only question in Tyson's young life seemed to be which reformatory and for how long. He wound up in the Tryon School for Boys in Johnstown, New York. There he met an ex-prize fighter named Bobby Stewart. Stewart told Tyson that if he wanted to learn how to box, there was a price.
The great lesson of Mike's life was when Bobby Stewart first got him in Tryon Reformatory. And he went to Bobby Stewart and said, teach me how to box. And Bobby Stewart said, I will only teach you how to box if you learn how to read. And it was an immediate trade-off of carrot and stick.
When Muhammad Ali was 12, he also reached a turning point. He was born on January 17, 1942, in Louisville, Kentucky. He was named Cassius Marcellus Clay, after the abolitionist who had once owned the Clay family as slaves. Ali grew up during a time when segregation was a normal way of life. Demonstrations by African Americans against this system were just beginning as Ali began taking his first swings. But far from being in trouble with the law, Ali's first trainer was in fact a police officer. Cassius ran into Officer Joe Martin at a local gym when his bicycle was stolen.
He was talking about whipping whoever he found that stole his bike, and I said, well, you better learn how to fight first. So he said, I'd like to come here. I said, you can start tonight or tomorrow night, or you can just keep it. So he did. He started the next night coming down, and he very seldom ever missed. Always, he was there when I got there, and he was there when I left. He's a very devoted kid, too. He enjoyed that boxing.
Like Mike Tyson, Ali grew up poor, but the Clay family was close. His father brought some money in as a sign painter. His mother remembers him as a fairly normal child, if a bit too dedicated to his newfound passion.
When he was 12 years old, he told me someday he was going to be champion of the world, which he did.
A 12-year-old Mike Tyson had also found something to hold on to. But for Tyson, boxing was more than enjoyment. It was a way out. He became obsessed with learning every move Stewart taught him. While everyone else at the reform school was sleeping, Tyson stayed up, practicing his moves alone in the dark.
The only time he was positive is when he was training. You gotta remember, this kid he was treated as an adult from ever. He never had a kid's life. He was in a man's body from the time he was 10 years old, and people treated him as an adult, even the staff where we worked.
Bobby Stewart learned his boxing from veteran trainer Cus D'Amato. D'Amato lived in the tiny town of Catskill, New York, and had trained two world champions, Floyd Patterson and Jose Torres. So when Stewart's new pupil showed he had promise, D'Amato came up to Tryon to take a look. They snuck in during the early morning hours, and Mike must have known his future hinged on his performance as he climbed into the ring with Stewart.
Tyson was trying to show us. He was auditioning. He knew that this was a place he could, if he could get to, it would be important and change in his life. And Tyson got a bloody nose, and he went 2 rounds. He got a bloody nose. He showed power. He showed some kind of resolve and determination, and he was 12 years old. That's what made anything that he did, made it significant.
Cuz said that, you know, he could be the next heavyweight champion. He'll be the next heavyweight. He's the next heavyweight champion in the world. Cuz, you know, actually said that.
When I took Mike out, we were walking out the back. I guess what he said. When I told him, no, because he's so insecure. I'm telling you, he said it, and then he started crying. He hugged me. I said, hey, but remember, the bottom line is work. You got to continue, and that means behavior, number 1, and a fight, number 2. And that was it.
Because I always knew deep inside that something good was going to happen to me. Always was showing positive that I was going to be successful in something. I wasn't just going to go back to Brooklyn and end up the rest of my life there like most of the people are back in jail for the rest of my life or dead. Always feel confident that something good will happen to me.
Something good was happening to Mike Tyson. Call it destiny or fate, but Mike Tyson was about to hook up with a man who would teach him to leave his dismal past behind and become the heavyweight champion of the world. At the age of 12, Mike Tyson's future was far from promising. With no father and living in poverty, Mike was already a convicted criminal. But when he met Cus D'Amato, his life suddenly had possibilities. D'Amato arranged to have Tyson paroled into his custody when he left reform school and brought him into a real home. Home was a huge white house where several other young boxers were already living. When Mike saw the place, he couldn't believe he would be part of this picture. But once again, there was a price.
You want to behave yourself? You can live here in this mansion. Yes, you have your own room, and then the whole works. He was fascinated. You know, he was scared, intimidated, just natural.
For the first time, Tyson got a taste of what it was like to be part of the American dream, part of a real family. D'Amato was a strict father figure who supported and encouraged Tyson to improve. He believed in Tyson more than Tyson believed in himself. When D'Amato started telling people in the fight business he had a winner training in his gym upstate, they believed him.
You didn't have to be a boxing genius to know this kid was a prodigy. The hand speed was astounding, and the power was astounding. And I didn't believe he was 13. He looked 18 to me. He was heavily muscled, big chest. And I said, you're putting me on. This kid can't be 13. But he was. And he was Mike Tyson.
That's it. See, ain't no way he's going to hit you then, right? And remember, it's always good to throw the punch where you could hit him and he can't hit you. That's what the science of boxing is all about.
Cus D'Amato's system is one of fluid defense leading to offense. You don't block punches, you slip punches. You bob and weave. You throw punches in combination. Mike proved to be a marvelous pupil.
It didn't stop at the gym door. Tyson would work just as hard when he went home at night, building up his physical strength, his speed, practicing moves, and refining the peekaboo style Cus had taught him.
Mike would go down in the cellar and work out. He would always just work out, always working out, trying to refine and learn what, put into action what he was learning. And that's what made Mike special. That's what made him become the youngest heavyweight champion ever, because he was a willing student. He found something that, that he wanted to become.
When he wasn't practicing, Tyson spent hours reading about boxing and watching old fight videos from the library of the 2 men sponsoring him, Jimmy Jacobs and Bill Caton.
He's the most knowledgeable man in terms of boxing history on the face of the earth. You show him a frame of a fight or a picture of a still, and he'll identify it, whether it's 1890 or 1910 or 1930 or 1960 or 70.
Cus taught Mike more than the technique and history of boxing. He taught him how to turn his life around in the ring. Cus D'Amato taught Tyson what it takes to be a winner.
I just learned the character of watching the fighter, That's what it really bases on. You watch the fighter itself. When you see a fighter fighting there when his nose broke or something, and he could have just easily quit, or else he's been down 7 or 8 times. He knows he could quit. He doesn't have anything to prove, but he just continues because of his character. That's the way a fighter should end his job, on his back.
The hero and the coward feels exactly the same. You have to have the discipline to do what a hero does and to keep yourself from doing what the coward does, or the so-called coward. Everybody's a coward, more or less.
Tyson appeared to have made what may have been the key discovery of his life while in the Catskills, something he'd never realized in his early years of small-time crime. For the first time, Tyson discovered something at which he could excel, something he could win praise and recognition for. But the violence of those days as a street tough would show through. While Tyson worked hard at disciplining himself, there was still something wild inside him, something Cus D'Amato didn't want to destroy entirely.
There were problems because it wasn't a beautiful relationship that it's made out to be. There was incidents where supposedly Mike spit at Cus when Cus had told him to do something. Cus took a stand where he tolerated more things than I had ever seen him tolerate before. And he allowed certain behavior to be swept under the rug.
Maybe Cus was prepared to ignore certain things because he knew Mike had the potential to take him back to the top again. Or maybe Cus saw another side of Mike Tyson, a side few people would ever see.
One time he's at my house, I don't recall what we were doing, and he was I had small kids at the time, and we had a sandbox in the backyard. And I looked out, and there's a man playing in the sandbox. And he walked in and he, that's all right. There's nothing wrong with that. So he felt bad, because he's always treated, he never had time to be a kid. Always acted, always treated as an adult.
Tyson's wilder side got him tossed out of the local high school. So Cus hired a private tutor and worked on Mike's behavior problems himself. Nevertheless, the protective shell Tyson had built around himself to survive Brownsville wasn't easy to crack.
And I don't let no one get that close. He's a high, but no one really knows Mike Tyson. Nobody's really friendly with Mike Tyson, except Cus D'Amato. Other than that, nobody is.
Cus's view that Mike was destined to be the next heavyweight champ was becoming obvious to everyone who stepped into the ring with him. He was undefeated in his early amateur bouts, going to the Junior Olympics and dispatching 5 opponents in record time, 4 by knockouts. It was the first step on the way to every young boxer's biggest goal, making the Olympic team.
Hey, Cus, 8-second knockout the first round. 8-second knockout. Yeah, he said, right hand. Yeah, he did. He set a new record.
But all those knockouts led to some trouble in the Tyson camp. If it had been hard to find boxers who could challenge him in an amateur fight, it was even harder to find fighters skilled enough to keep up with him on a daily basis in practice.
Cus called me when Mike was just 15 years old and said, "You know we need sparring." And I said, "Yes, Cus, I know you need it, and I know you're making every effort to get it." He said, "Well, I have now the opportunity to get 2 superb sparring partners. They've just finished training Larry Holmes. They're on their way home, and they're willing to come in and work with Mike a week each." So I said, "Grab them." So Cus said, "But they want $1,000 a week each." I said, "Grab them." Cus said, $1,000? I said, yes. So there was a 15-year-old boy who was getting $1,000 a week sparring partners, which is just what Larry Holmes had been paying them, the heavyweight champion of the world.
Despite his sledgehammer blows, Tyson was about to suffer his first setback in the ring. An Olympic gold medal is the quickest route to boxing glory, and Tyson tried out for the 1984 U.S. team. But 2 questionable decisions kept Tyson off the squad. Those close to him felt he was a victim of Olympic politics.
They changed the rules. Said, all right. Well, now you Tyson, you got to fight somebody else for the right to fight Henry Tillman, because they were trying any which way to get rid of Mike. Now Mike wins, they got to fight again, and that's supposed to be the democratic way, and to get the right fighter. Mike beats Tillman easier the second time, easier, and they robbed him again.
No such problems plagued Muhammad Ali, who also had his eye on Olympic glory. Unlike Mike Tyson, He didn't have Cus D'Amato to teach him technique. Instead, he picked up what he could at 2 local gyms, and it was enough for him to emerge undefeated in 108 amateur bouts. He went on to win 2 National Golden Gloves championships and 6 state crowns. In the finals of the U.S. Golden Gloves, he went up against Jimmy Jones.
This was the finals for the United States Golden Glove Championship. Jimmy Jones is a tall fellow, and he had a lot of straight, fast left jabs. My speed beat him. I did a lot of footwork, a lot of dancing, a lot of moving in and out. He finally got tired, and in the 3rd round, I beat him, but the first 2 were close.
Cassius knew if he won an Olympic gold medal, his future in boxing would be assured. He tried out for the team heading for the 1960 Olympic Games.
In the Olympic tryouts, I fought Allen Hudson. That was the biggest fight I had here in the United States. That was for the United States Olympic Championship, and the winners later went on to Rome. And naturally, I was the winner, and I knocked him out in the 3rd round. He was a bad, fast left hooker. He was knocking out everybody with left hooks, but my left jabs were too fast for him. My in and out footwork was too fast for him, and he just couldn't master my speed.
Cassius Clay emerged from the Olympic Games in Rome with a coveted gold medal, but only after a grueling gold medal match.
Cassius, of your 4 fights, which one gave you the most trouble?
Well, the last fight, the boy from Poland, he was...
Petrakowski, I believe.
Yes,
that's close.
He was real determined, and it's hard to beat a guy when you reach the final bout, because it's hard to beat a guy when he has his mind made up that he wants to win.
At just 18 years of age, Cassius returned to Louisville to be hailed as a hero.
Well, I was thinking about it right now. It all depends on when I want to turn professional. If I turn next year, I would be a full-fledged heavyweight, but next year. But like if I turned into weight soon, I would have to fight heavyweight because I would have to spot too much weight if I'm not.
As a gold medal winner, the young champ signed a 6-year management contract with a syndicate of 11 Louisville millionaires. He got $10,000 in cash, a guarantee of $4,000 a year, and a 50% split of the purse. This syndicate would hire Angelo Dundee as his trainer. Clay now had his management team and trainer in place. He felt his future was in the bag. Mike Tyson was not given the opportunity to match the victory Cassius Clay achieved at the Olympic Games. He did, however, go on to fight in Europe, where he resumed his winning streak. Upon returning to the U.S. from their respective battles, both fighters prepared for their first professional fights, the next step to the heavyweight championship of the world.
From Catskill, New York, weighing 214 pounds, Mike Tyson.
March 11th, 1985. Mike Tyson was just 18 years old. After his failure to make the Olympic team, Tyson was making his professional debut against Hector Mercedes in Albany, New York. That night, back in 1985, Mike Tyson celebrated. And in his own way, so did his coach and mentor, Cus D'Amato.
And doing as well as he's doing and improving as he has gives me the motivation and interest to stay alive. Because I believe that a person dies when they no longer wants to live. And he gives me the motivation. I will stay alive, and I will watch him become a success. Because I will not leave until that happens.
While Tyson would remain undefeated inside the ring, outside he would be rocked by a devastating personal loss. His mother, Lorna Tyson, died of cancer. Although she had stayed in Brownsville during his years in the Catskills, the two had remained close, and Tyson was sorry she could not share in his redemption and success.
My mother really, she had a lot of pride, and it hurt her a lot to see me do things like that. That's how come I feel so bad that she can't see me now, see what I accomplished now.
Mike Tyson had just turned pro, but with the passing of his mother, he'd lost his only real link to his roots. There was just one place for him to turn, and that was to his work. With each foray into pro boxing, Iron Mike grew stronger and stronger. His second match against a journeyman fighter named Trent Singleton followed the Mercedes bout by about 5 weeks. It too lasted less than a round. 6 weeks later, Don Halpin climbed into the ring with Tyson. Halpin lasted longer than any opponent would during the entire year of 1985. When Cassius Clay began his professional career, he too fought nearly a fight a month, beginning against Tony Hunsucker on October 29, 1960. Hunsucker was easily dispatched in 6 rounds. Throughout the early 60s, Clay built up an impressive string of knockouts, including Alex Miteff in 6, Sonny Banks in 4, and ex-champion Archie Moore in 4 rounds. In all, Cassius Clay would rack up 9 knockouts in a row in just over a year.
Cassius, how do you feel today?
Pretty good. How you doing?
I hear you met Don Juan today. How was he?
Yeah. He wasn't too friendly.
What do you have to say?
He didn't even shake my hand.
What are you going to do about that?
Now you must fall.
For both Clay and Tyson, their early fights were against modest journeymen who were little more than cannon fodder to allow the 2 future champs to rack up wins and gain confidence. Tyson was being handled by veteran managers Bill Caton and Jimmy Jacobs.
Each opponent was very carefully selected by Cuss, Jim, and me to be not dangerous, but yet to give Mike a bit of a challenge.
No one said to Mike Tyson that his opponents were beneath him, and chances are he wouldn't have even noticed if someone had. Tyson was busy learning the technical skills and the ring strategy he would need to become a champion. By the time he fought Michael Johnson, people were starting to talk about Tyson. He was still a youngster with no big fight exposure, but word was getting around. In fact, many of his opponents seemed beaten before they even put on their gloves.
But he didn't even break a sweat. He may have to run around on the boardwalk a little bit.
When Cassius Clay was Tyson's age, he too was gaining a reputation as the Louisville Lip.
I don't care how small the ring is. I'll fight that chump in a telephone booth. I'll get him at the weigh-in. You can look at me, I'm loaded with confidence. I can't beat me. I had 180 amateur fights, 22 professional fights, and I'm good as a girl.
His colorful antics and impeccable boxing skills made him the darling of fans and sports writers alike. Some might have come to see the brightest young star in boxing. Others might have come to see the loudmouth braggart from Louisville get his teeth punched in. But Clay kept them coming. He was just what the ailing world of prize fighting needed at the time. Clay was developing into one of the most successful, indeed epic characters in the history of the sport.
I'm not concentrating on Doug Jones. He's nothing but a bum. Sonny Liston is the man I want. I'm not thinking about Doug Jones. Jones will fall in 6, and I might cut it to 3.
You know, if this boy upsets you, you've had it.
If Jones upset me, I will retire.
At that age, Mike Tyson was also developing, but in a very different direction. With the professional advancement came real personal growth for the former street punk. While training between bouts, Tyson seemed to flourish in the D'Amato household. After his mother died, Cuss became his legal guardian. The old Italian trainer and the youngster from Brooklyn had become far more than just teacher and pupil.
He's like my father. I never look at it, even though that's the way it is, I never look at it as he's my trainer, my manager, all that. I never really think of that too much. I just go about the way that he has his feelings towards me. And it's like a father and son relationship, and that's mostly what I'm based on. You know, even though he is my manager and trainer, sometimes I forget that because of the way we are.
I am a professional, and as a professional, my judgments as a fighter are detached. I never allow my personal feelings to get involved, no matter how much affection I may have. But as I said before, you either gain or lose respect. And having watched him come from where he was to what he is, I can say honestly, I have a very deep affection for him. I do. Because, and not only affection and admiration.
Cus D'Amato was 77 years old. He knew he had to move quickly if he was to see Tyson fight for the World Championship. In 1985 alone, Mike Tyson fought 15 pro bouts, an astonishing workload. All 15 ended the same way, in knockouts, and all ended before the fourth round. The Donnie Long fight was typical, even though some boxing writers at the time thought it might be a mistake to let the teenager go against the experienced Donnie Long.
Tyson again, another one of those fresh youngsters, only 19 years of age. Long is 27.
Oh, wow. Well, that was quick.
Tyson putting him down here early in the first. Frank Cappuccino looking on closely. You see Long holding those gloves up to say he's all right, but is he? Here comes Tyson. Left hand again.
Well, he nearly sent Long out of the ring with that left hook.
Tyson. Oh, Long is down. Second time. Another knockdown.
There is no 3 knockdown rule, but the referee can stop it after 3 if he decides so. This is very impressive. Mike Tyson not expected to come out this strong against Long.
5 of 8 have fallen in the first. Is it 6 of 9 as Tyson comes out with a strong right hand barrage again?
This is as bad as I've ever seen Donnie Long look, but give Tyson credit. That's it. Wow.
The left hand puts him down. He collapses, and this one is over as the doctors rush into the ring.
Out of his last 11 fights, this was the 8th time Tyson had pounded his way to a win in the first round. But this win would stick with Tyson for a very long time. It was to be the last time that Cus D'Amato would ever see his young protege fight. The man who taught Mike Tyson how to fight his way out of the streets died on November 4th, 1985. Mike Tyson was one of the pallbearers, along with the other 2 men Cus D'Amato set on the road to the championship, Floyd Patterson and Jose Torres.
It's tough, you know. It's hard to explain because after winning and everything, there's no one to talk to at the house. You know, there's Camille and everyone in my family here, but still, when I'm lonely and bored like I am now, I used to only be bored part of the time. Then I talk to him and he keep me in suspense. Now I'm bored all the time. I have nothing to do. I just always try to think of everything that he told me and remember.
When he first learned of Cus's death, Tyson disappeared. He needed time to himself to deal with the loss of his mentor and father figure, the only person he ever really trusted. Only 9 days after Cus died, Tyson was due to fight Eddie Richardson.
A lot of people thought you might not come down here and fight. You were quoted as saying Cus would have wanted it that way.
Well, most definitely. Even though he didn't, Cus D'Amato, being around him since the age of 13, I'm more like business orientated, and I know not to let anything get involved in business. You know, things happen, we all have disappointments, but we can't let these things stop our lives. We have to go on.
Fighting in memory of his beloved trainer, Tyson made Richardson pay very heavily that night.
Right hand by Tyson. Oh, my. First punch he threw.
Well, if they can find some fights, then.
That left hand almost drove Richardson right through the canvas.
He not only knocked him down, but he absolutely carried him through the air.
And it's over.
I see right now
He came about 8 o'clock in the morning. He knocked at my door, asked me if he could come over to see me. He came and he just sat there. I said, how did you make out? He says, I made good. He said, I was looking for somebody that wasn't there. And the tears were just rolling down his face. So he said, Cus was not there. That he could not tell me. He said, everybody tells me I do good. He says, but nobody tells me if I do bad. He says, it doesn't matter how good I would do, I would have done. Cus would always find something that I did wrong.
There was no dominant figure in the world of boxing when Mike Tyson was powering his way through his early professional bouts in the early and mid-'80s. No Muhammad Ali, no Joltin' Joe Frazier. In a way, the championship seemed ripe for the picking if Mike Tyson could keep his momentum going. But first, he had to overcome the death of his legendary trainer. In 1985, Mike Tyson was undefeated in 15 fights. By 1986, he was big news. The story of the Brooklyn bad boy with a soft voice who turned into an animal in the ring captured the world's imagination. The championship had seemed his for the taking until he suffered the blow no one was sure he could overcome, the death of his trainer and surrogate father, Cus D'Amato. But Tyson still had one thing going for him. The team Cus had put together to bring Tyson to the top was still there. Co-managers Bill Caton and Jimmy Jacobs headed the organization. Trainers Teddy Atlas and Kevin Rooney kept Tyson practicing the D'Amato peekaboo style system, and they were satisfied that as Tyson approached his 19th birthday, inside the ring, his skills remained superb.
Cus got sick quickly and died in November of '85. Now, at that point, Mike was 11-0. So, you know, I want to say that I mourned Cus's death by just continuing what he had started.
There were other moments of doubt for Tyson. While his earlier opponents were carefully selected and might not have been up to his level, he was now being severely challenged in the ring. When his next two fights against James Quick Tillis and Mitch Blood Green lasted a full 10 rounds each, some boxing writers began to question whether Tyson was the real thing or a myth created by the Caton Jacobs publicity machine.
He wears no robe. He wears no socks with his boxing shoes. He says that makes him feel more like a warrior, more like a gladiator as he enters the ring.
But when Tyson beat his next opponent, Reggie Gross, in under 3 minutes, his critics were suddenly silenced.
And Gross is down again. His eyes are very glassy. I don't know if he can get up. It's up to 5 and 6. I don't think this fight can continue. His eyes are very, very glassy.
I knew Mike was a great fighter, or I felt that, the night in Madison Square Garden when he knocked out a very tough guy by the name of Reggie Gross. Mike had fought 2 10-round fights previous to that against James Tillis, his first 10-round fight, and then Mitch Green, 3 weeks later, a 10-round fight. 2 weeks later, he fought Reggie Gross, who was a very tough fighter, and in spectacular fashion knocked him out in 2 minutes of the first round. Not in the arena that night, but later watching the videotape and watching not Mike Tyson's offense, but his incredible defense. In 20,000 fight films, I had never seen anything like that.
It was beginning to look as if Tyson would get his chance to fight for the World Championship. With 27 wins, no defeats, and 25 knockouts, the only question now was if Mike Tyson was mentally ready for his shot at the top. Team Tyson decided the answer was yes, and arranged a bout with the ranking heavyweight Trevor Berbick. It was an unprecedented opportunity. Never before had anyone so young been a serious contender for the belt of the World Heavyweight Champion. 20 years earlier, Cassius Clay was also trying to become the youngest heavyweight champion in history.
I predict that by the end of 1963, I will be the youngest heavyweight champion in history. And the only reason I won't be is because this fella, Sonny Liston, would be ducking and dodging me.
Most people believe that the current champ at the time, Sonny Liston, was a lock to win any prospective fight with Clay. Liston had just pulverized the previous champ, Floyd Patterson, in a title rematch, and was being hailed as boxing's next great champion.
Who's going to win the fight? Yeah.
Sonny Liston.
I don't think you know what you're talking about.
Listen, it's too powerful. I'll not want the second round.
Can't be scared of death.
I beat him before the fight.
You'd actually take him on before the fight?
Beat him like I'm his daddy.
But no amount of publicity stunts could convince the boxing community that Clay was for real. Most people gave little credence to his claim that he would beat Liston.
One Liston. Second round, Liston. Liston in 4.
Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. You got too much mouth, Clay.
Liston gonna win.
After pestering the champion for months, Clay would finally get his shot at the title. The fight would take place February 25th, 1964.
And as of this minute, it is now official.
The fight is on! The annihilation is on! I'm so happy. Let's get it on. Want to go now?
The odds makers made Clay an 8-1 underdog.
All set now. World heavyweight boxing title on the line. 31-year-old Sonny Liston, 22-year-old Cassius Clay. Sonny the champion, Cassius the challenger. Sonny 218, Cassius 210.5, a 7.5-pound weight pool.
Round 3 and Cassius Clay wearing white shoes has surprised everyone. Most boxing fans thought that Clay would be bombed out in 1 or 2 rounds by the awesome Sonny Liston. The daring young challenger has nicknamed himself the greatest, and tonight he's beginning to prove it. Cassius has the fastest hands in heavyweight history. His combinations and flurries are unbelievable. Liston can't catch the elusive Clay. All through this fight, Cassius has gripped that left hand into Sonny Liston's face.
They might be stopping it. That might be all, ladies and gentlemen. Get up there, Joe. Get up there. Get up in the ring. Wait, come here. Come here. Come here. I don't have a mark on my face. Yeah. And I upset Sonny Liston, and I just turned 22 years old. I must be the greatest.
Cassius Clay became the heavyweight champion of the world. Las Vegas, Nevada, November 22nd, 1986. Mike Tyson would attempt to fulfill a dream that Muhammad Ali had had 20 years earlier, to become the youngest heavyweight champion in history.
This is the main event of the night. 12 rounds of boxing for the WBC Championship of the World.
Tyson took charge right from the start,
Big right hand, Tyson.
pounding Berbick with left hooks, followed swiftly with a right.
And Berbick is rocked.
It was a big, big round for Mike Tyson, not only because he showed he had faster hands and beat Berbick to the punch, but because he did show the patient aggressiveness that we talked about earlier.
There's another big shot by Tyson. Berbick in a heap of trouble. Down he goes. This one is going to be over, I believe. It's over. That's all. And we have a new era in boxing.
Moments after being handed the championship belt, Tyson would dedicate the victory to the memory of his mentor, Cus D'Amato.
Might possibly fight.
The winner by unanimous decision and undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, Iron Mike Tyson.
For both Mike Tyson and Muhammad Ali, winning the championship belt brought big changes. With the title came not only fame and fortune, but also the notoriety and pressure of being #1 in the world. For Mike Tyson, it was easy to stay focused, as he concentrated on consolidating the championships, winning all 3 belts. But there was one problem on the way to the top. He'd been kept busy fighting every 3 or 4 weeks. Now, he was fighting every 3 or 4 months. Fame and free time added up to one thing: women.
Now all of a sudden you're heavyweight champion, and for a lot of reasons, including tax reasons and including television reasons and everything else, you can't fight every 3 weeks. You know, you fight Trevor Berbick in October, and you're not going to be fighting Carl Williams until the following May. That's an awful lot of time in between, and you're not going to be in the gym all that time. So there's a hell of a lot more time to find trouble if trouble is right around the corner.
30 seconds left. Tyson just looking for the one shot. Well, seconds left.
Tyson still has to be careful because Larry, oh, that shot, that's
huge
it.
Right hand.
That should be it.
And down goes Holmes, and that's going to be it. It's over. That's all.
After Tyson's fight with former heavyweight champ Larry Holmes, it became obvious what a juggling act Mike's romantic life had become.
Mike came to my office after the Holmes fight to thank me. He was happy, well-adjusted, because he had been going with 3 girls at that time: Suzette Charles, Miss America, Naomi Campbell, a great model, as well as Robin Givens. And I recognized the fact that if those 3 girls were together, first of all, they might not get along, and secondly, the press would have a field day. I put them in 3 different sections of the arena for the Holmes fight, separated them. So Mike came up to thank me for that and laughed about it.
Imagine Teen Tyson's shock when barely 2 weeks later, the mother of a young actress called Jimmy Jacobs and insisted that Mike marry her daughter, Robin Givens, immediately.
Of course, I was astonished. And he said that Ruth Roper had said to him that the reason for this is that Robin is 3 months pregnant, and Ruth Roper insisted that they get married immediately.
The road from the championship led to marriage for Muhammad Ali as well, but it was overshadowed by a much greater controversy. The day after his championship win over Sonny Liston, Cassius Clay revealed he was a member of the Nation of Islam, headed by Elijah Muhammad. He even changed his name from Cassius Clay to Muhammad Ali at the behest of his spiritual mentor.
Cassius Clay is a name no more, is that right?
Yes, sir. It's Muhammad Ali. Muhammad means worthy of all praises, and Ali means most high in the Asian African language.
How long have you had the name?
Well, for about 2 weeks now.
Is there anyone special who gave you the name?
Yes, sir. My leading teacher, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad.
Many of Ali's fans were puzzled by the change in his political consciousness. The Nation of Islam was notoriously radical and segregationalist, and the preaching of its leader Elijah Muhammad elicited fear and outrage among many in the white community.
I would not say the white man is a descendant of Satan, because that would be wrong. We didn't have a Satan before white man. So the white man is Satan himself.
The charming underdog Cassius Clay was gone, and in his place was the avenging Muhammad Ali, leading the call for black power that was sweeping through the African-American community in the 60s. Fellow Nation of Islam minister Malcolm X had this to say about Ali.
The power structure had successfully created the image of the American Negro as someone with no confidence, no militancy, and they had done this by giving him images of heroes that weren't truly militant or confident. And now here come Cassius, the exact contrast of everything that was representative of the Negro image. He said he was the greatest, all of the odds were against him, he upset the odds makers, he won, he became victorious, he became the champ. They knew that as soon as, if people began to identify with Cassius and the type of image he was creating, they were going to have trouble out of these Negroes, because they'd have Negroes walking around the streets saying, "I'm the greatest."
In May of 1964, Ali visited Africa not only as a boxing hero, but as a spokesman for African-American Muslims. He was greeted by presidents and state officials alike.
This is a golden Muslim mosque that was presented to me by the Islamic Council of all Egypt. All solid gold. Solid gold. Solid gold. Yes, sir. Say it again. Solid gold. Say it again. This mosque, I'm very honored, and I hope that he will receive it. This is a gift, our leading teacher, for waking all of us up, because we were in a bad state of condition before we heard him.
After his trip to Africa, Ali came back to Chicago, where he was introduced to 23-year-old Sanji Roy. Although she was not a Muslim, she agreed to try and obey his religious code, and they married. With his new wife by his side, Ali laughed off charges his title had changed him.
You think your personality has changed since you won the title?
Well, I'm a little more relaxed and settled. As you can see, I have a pretty wife here.
And I don't have to talk like I do. She don't like me to talk too much, do you? She told me to be quiet.
Why did you do that?
Action speaks for itself. You didn't have to talk anymore.
She said, I don't have to talk anymore. She don't like to talk either. She just likes to listen.
Despite controversy over his conversion to Islam, Ali was on a boxing rampage as his rematch with Sonny Liston approached in 1965. His confidence was at its peak.
They are now approaching us on their horses. What do you say, stewardess? You mean the plane is going to crash? Say a prayer, recite a Bible verse. Well, I don't know no Bible verse. Just do something religious. I'll take up a collection.
You should be in Hollywood.
I'm so pretty I should be chiseled and gold.
Go.
So you want the Bible?
Please.
Clay takes the lead at the start. As he did the night he won the title, Clay uses the ring, makes Liston look slow.
Liston was down in 1 minute and 40 seconds.
I couldn't tell whether or not that punch hurt.
Tubbs is hurt. Tubbs is hurt badly. It was a left hook.
When Mike Tyson went to Japan to defend his title against Tony Tubbs, his personal problems became more complicated. It was a vintage Tyson fight. He devastated the former WBA champ. But the victory celebration didn't last long. The first of the twin disasters to befall Tyson began with an announcement by his new wife.
He beats Tubbs. On the plane ride back, Robin Givens and Ruth Roper announced, I'm Mrs. Tyson. Everything goes through me. And they start spending his money.
Then, the day after Tyson returned from the Tokyo trip, longtime mentor Jim Jacobs died.
And when Jimmy died, the women just started again. They really intensified the pressure of trying to take over Mike's financial matters. And that's what they did. So Mike had Robin's shoulder to cry on, and what a bad shoulder that was.
The new Mrs. Tyson announced she'd had a miscarriage. It soon became clear Robin and her mother, Ruth Roper, were running the show. The tabloids painted the two as schemers, plotting to take over Tyson's millions. Givens said she was a loyal wife, trying to protect her husband against boxing sharks, whom she claimed was stealing Tyson's money. Team Tyson said the tail was pinned on the wrong shark.
She knew there was tremendous money to be gained by getting Mike's money. Now, even though she was a superstar in her own right and making very big dollars, Mike is making serious money. And Mike couldn't resist her charms. I don't blame him. I don't blame him. It's happened to other guys before. It'll happen to guys again.
I'm here. I didn't plan to be here today because I'm angry. Because my mother, who has been the best mother and clearly become Michael's mother, and if you can just see their relationship, it's a beautiful relationship, is really being crushed by all this.
Mike's battles in the ring were still big news. Atlantic City was the setting for his next battle, one that would be the richest heavyweight fight in history. Tyson would defend his title against Michael Spinks in front of the very man who had first inspired him to box years earlier in a youth facility.
The greatest of all time, ladies and gentlemen, the former three-time heavyweight champion of the world, Muhammad Ali.
It was expected to be Tyson's biggest test yet. For each of those seconds, he'd earned over $200,000. Some say this would be the high point of Tyson's boxing career.
I think as a fighter, he reached his peak the night he knocked out Michael Spinks in 91 seconds. that night he was like Joe Louis against Max Schmeling or Muhammad Ali against Sonny Liston. He was invincible. And I think that was also the night he fired Bill Caton, broke with Kevin Rooney. And I think from that night forward, that night was the turning point of his life. That night he went with Don King. And after that, his boxing skills eroded and his character eroded.
Manager Bill Caton's job was cut to a TV commentary role, sparking a court battle. Some believe Robin Givens and Ruth Roper were pulling the strings. Others who saw the Spinks fight say another force had come into play in Tyson's life. Promoter Don King. Whoever was running the show, it was about to become clear it wasn't Mike Tyson. For both Mike Tyson and Muhammad Ali, the turmoil happening outside the ring in their personal lives was about to do what no opponent had yet been able to accomplish inside the ring. Both Mike Tyson and Muhammad Ali found what was happening to them outside the ring was turning into a ride on a runaway train. Their personal lives made more news than their boxing. The headlines about Tyson became increasingly bizarre. Tyson and Robin Givens got into an argument while driving in his Bentley in New York City. Tyson jumped out of the car and told police officers to keep it. But Bill Caton arranged to get it back the next day. Then, Tyson got into a street fight with a fighter he had beaten in the ring. Mitch Blood Green, Tyson, ended up breaking his hand.
That's right, you ask him. He's a young, dumb knucklehead that got to ask his wife for permission to do whatever he do. You understand what I'm trying to say?
On September 4th, 1988, Tyson crashed Robin's BMW into a tree. Givens almost got into a brawl with photographers as Tyson was unloaded from the ambulance.
The guy a break, okay? Give him a break, damn it. Give him a break. Give the guy a break. Give him a break.
Take it easy, lady. See, he was a very warm and friendly person, and he changed entirely, and that was Robin. In fact, early in his marriage, he and I would talk on the telephone, and one day I was talking to him, and he was very, very warm and friendly, and suddenly his voice changed, almost as though someone stabbed him in the back. His voice changed entirely. I said, Mike, what happened? He said, Robin walked in.
What happened next was almost unbelievable. Robin Givens and Mike Tyson appeared together on Barbara Walters' ABC program 2020. As the heavyweight champ of the world sat there looking dazed, Givens told the world he was a manic depressive brought under control with medication. This might well have been the fatal blow to the marriage.
His own friends in the street told him, Mike, she dissed you, man. She dissed you big time. And when Mike hears this from his own people, and I'm sure he did, from people who he liked and respected, who he knew they had no ulterior motives for him, against him, just his friends. That broke up the relationship.
Tyson turned to Bill Caton for some damage control. Caton had renowned psychiatrist Abraham Halpern cancel his appointment to examine Tyson the next day.
Mike came in, they went downstairs for 2 hours, then he brought him back up, and he said Mike was definitely not manic depressive. There was no excuse for his being put on lithium. It was a completely outrageous diagnosis.
Even so, Mike's temper was so frayed, one morning when he was on a training run, he threw his Walkman at a cameraman he spotted. In the end, the divorce papers were signed after only 8 months of marriage. The reason cited? Irreconcilable differences.
Everything was chaos. I was fighting with a wife, with managers, with promoters and managers fighting. I was torn between everybody because I wanted to be loyal to everyone. I never had a chance to be loyal to myself.
Muhammad Ali and his wife Sanji were divorced after only 1.5 years of marriage. She is quoted as saying that the Nation of Islam told Ali to divorce her because she was an embarrassment. His religion also put him in the center of another controversy. After failing a military qualifying exam in 1964, Ali's draft status was 1Y, not qualified for service. In 1966, as the war in Vietnam heated up, he was reclassified 1A, eligible for the draft. Ali was furious.
And I just can't understand how they could reclassify me as 1A when they were the ones who said, the government officials were the ones who said that I was 1Y and that I wasn't qualified. It was their decision. Now, all of a sudden,
I'm 1A without any test, without notifying me or checking to see if I'm any wiser than I was the last time or any worse.
When Ali began to criticize the war and draft board, his remarks sparked a huge controversy. His next fight was scheduled to take place in Chicago in February of 1966. But the Illinois State Athletic Commission called a hearing to demand a retraction.
I'm not here to apologize in the way that the press has projected that I would apologize.
What about your unpatriotic remarks that you made?
That will be straightened out with the government or whoever I have to face when it comes to that.
Are you apologizing for having made those statements at this time?
That'll be taken up with the government.
If I recall correctly, you said you were the people's champion?
Yes, sir.
Do you think that you're acting like a people's champion?
Yes, sir.
When Ali refused to comply with the commission's orders, the fight in Chicago was canceled and the WBA stripped him of his title. Ali's next fights were in Europe. His first stop was England for a second fight with Henry Cooper, who was stymied by a cut over his left eye. After a third-round knockout of Brian London, Ali battled the game German Karl Mittenberger in Munich. It went 12 grueling rounds before Ali was able to knock him out.
Got him with 10 seconds.
When Ali returned to the States to fight, however, politics again took center stage in Houston on February 1967. Ernie Terrell, the WBA's new champion, refused to call Ali by his Muslim name.
Why don't you call me my name, man?
Well, what's your name? You told me your name was Cassius Clay.
I never told you my name was Cassius Clay.
Well,
my name is Muhammad Ali, and you will announce it right there in the center of that ring after the fight if you don't do it now.
for the benefit of this broadcast, him. All right?
You just acting just like an old Uncle Tom. Another fraud counterfeit. I'm going to punish you.
Let me tell you something, man. You ain't got no...
Back off of me. Back off of me.
Uncle Tom.
That's what you are, Uncle Tom.
Why are you going to call me Uncle Tom?
What you going to... You heard me. Just back off of me.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, as the two contestants prepare for battle right now...
Back off of me, man. Back off of me, man.
Another interview has been recorded for posterity as the two gentlemen continue.
Uncle Tom.
Perfect, that's it.
Come on, man.
No, I don't really hate him, but I don't really hate no one, but I don't like him for his actions and the way he was acting and insisting on calling me Cassius Clay, knowing that my name is Muhammad Ali, and I'm a Muslim, and whenever this is discussed as serious, I don't play with the religion or the name. So he really made me angry, and that was not play, that was real.
For Ali, this was more than just a battle for a boxing title. It was a defense of his religious convictions, a response to the machinations that would eventually keep him out of the ring for almost 4 years.
Champion Muhammad Ali, an endlessly moving target, never still for a moment. Ali is out to show Terrell and the world that there is only one heavyweight champion, and that there is no heavyweight in the world that he can't play with. Ali is taunting the challenger.
Muhammad Ali had promised to punish Terrell, and Ali was a man who kept his promises. By the 7th round, Ernie Terrell's left eye had closed, leaving him to the mercy of Ali's lightning-fast strikes. As Ali pummeled his opponent, he yelled, "What's my name?" again and again, taking out his frustrations on the man to whom the Boxing Commission had given his title, the man who had refused to call him Ali. Mike Tyson was facing different pressures. He was still the champ, but Robin Givens was gone, and so was everyone who helped put him on top. Cus D'Amato and Jimmy Jacobs died. Bill Caton and trainer Kevin Rooney were fired. Now, he was a Don King man.
Don King is probably the greatest con man of all time. He makes Finghaldi look like a rank amateur. He maintains his control because on the other side of the coin, we must give him credit for what he is. He is a brilliant promoter, undoubtedly the most brilliant promoter going back to Tex Rickard. And he works very hard. And he is a really tremendous businessman. He is smart, he is sharp. He could have succeeded without being the con man that he is. He would have succeeded possibly even better.
February 25th, 1989, Mike Tyson fought his first bout under his new management and training team headed by Don King. He beat underdog Frank Bruno, but Tyson no longer seemed invincible.
After he stopped being trained by Kevin Rooney, I think there was a noticeable difference in his style. Really, the peekaboo style was gone, and a lot of the upper body movement was gone, and I think his boxing suffered because of it.
The fight was not a successful fight financially, and it was not a successful fight for Mike because he took more punches in that fight than he did in all the previous fights put together. And yet King had his talons into Mike and held on.
Yet characteristically, King seemed to have no doubts about his fighter.
He's a gladiator, he's a fighter. And that's what a fighter's about. But the difference is, he's just not a fighter that gets in the ring and say, ooh, ah, and I'm glad to be here. He's a fighter that can think. He's a fighter in his heart, too.
Tyson would have one more victory, something to prove Don King's points. The challenger was called Carl the Truth Williams. But the real truth was that Carl Williams was no match for the still unbeaten champion. Both Tyson and Muhammad Ali were on the brink of finding out what their personal choices would cost them. They were both about to see what life was like as an ex-champ.
The champion, the challenger, the champion, the challenger.
The next fight Don King arranged for Mike Tyson was in Tokyo with a supposed no-hoper named James Buster Douglas. There were disturbing signs before the Buster Douglas fight. Tyson looked lethargic in training and was floored by sparring partner Greg Page. But the smart money had it rated as an easy fight for Tyson. After all, the champion had a 37-fight win streak. But in the Tokyo Dome that Sunday lunchtime in Japan, Mike Tyson's boxing.
It is my belief that Tyson, when he got to Japan, who was fat and out of shape, starved himself, literally starved himself so he would not look ridiculous, fat. And as a result of that, I believe he was very weak.
This makes Cinderella look like a sad story, what Buster Douglas has done here tonight.
Let's go ahead and call it the biggest upset in the history of heavyweight championship fight.
He weighs 202.5, the challenger, Zora Foley.
When Muhammad Ali took on Zora Foley in New York, it was March of 1967. Ali didn't know this would be his last fight for 3.5 years. But as he got ready for his fight with Foley, he was clearly worried.
I have a very strange feeling if this thing do go through as far as induction is concerned, appeals or what have you are turned down. As a matter of fact, I know this is my last fight.
See how well the challenger rolls back from those punches? And there's Foley down!
Ali had Foley down in 7. The fight took place on March 22nd. On April 28th, Muhammad Ali was called for induction into the armed services.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Muhammad Ali has just refused to be inducted into the United States Armed Forces.
You can see that this has degenerated into a kind of bedlam, with the heavyweight champion of the world totally non-committal, passing out to a given few a prepared statement which he says establishes his position.
Whatever the punishment, whatever the persecution is for standing up for my religious beliefs, even if it means facing machine gun fire that day, I will face it before denouncing Elijah Muhammad and the religion of Islam. I'm ready to die.
Deposed heavyweight champion Cassius Clay at a federal court in Houston is found guilty of violating the U.S. Selective Service laws by refusing to be inducted. He is sentenced to 5 years in prison and fined $10,000, the maximum penalty for the offense, which is a felony. The sentence was appealed by Clay's lawyers.
As anti-war demonstrations swept college campuses and African Americans held demonstrations demanding their rights, Muhammad Ali became a flashpoint for dissension. Here was a man of such sterling character that he would willingly risk prison before he'd betray his convictions.
No matter what you think of Mr. Muhammad Ali's religion, you certainly have to admire his courage.
The New York Times reported 35% of the casualties are black people. It's crystal clear that the United States is moving to wipe out the young black youth of this country by sending them to Vietnam. For our survival, we must say, as did Mr. Muhammad Ali, that we cannot go.
I'm not going to help nobody get something my Negroes don't have. If I'm going to die, I'll die now, right here fighting you. If I'm going to die, you my enemy. My enemy is the white people, not Viet Cong or Chinese or Japanese. You my opposer when I want freedom. You my opposer when I want justice. You my opposer when I want equality. You won't even stand up for me in America for my religious beliefs, and you want me to go somewhere and fight, but you won't even stand up for me here at home. You won't stand up for what I believe now. So you won't fight.
We do have common problems and common concerns, and above all, as Muhammad Ali has just said, we are all victims of the same system of oppression, and even though we may have different religious beliefs, this does not at all bring about a difference in terms of our concerns.
Ali's appeal was denied. He was stripped of his heavyweight title, and the World Boxing Association held an elimination tournament to find a new champion. Ali was unable to get a license to fight from boxing commissions in any of the 50 states. The government stripped him of his passport, and he was unable to travel. He would not be able to enter the ring again for over 3.5 years.
It has been said that I have two alternatives: either go to jail or go to the army. But I would like to say that there is another alternative, and that alternative is justice.
Mike Tyson's loss of the heavyweight title would be just the beginning of the downfall of this champ.
My issue is, if you don't have anything to fight for the title, the money don't mean anything. If you don't stand for anything, you're as good as a dead man. You're not worth nothing.
The way seemed clear for him to regain the championship after Evander Holyfield stripped the title from Buster Douglas. Tyson was still a big moneymaker in the ring. But if his personal life as a champ was rocky, life as an ex-champ was even worse.
They began to hang out with drug dealers, big-time drug dealers, in the rap music world where there's a lot of belligerence and antisocial attitude, around with Don King where there's all kinds of criminals and guys cutting corners, and that environment began to, I think, erode all the good work that had been done during the years with Cuss and Steve Lott and Kevin Rooney.
Tyson escaped back into the ring, facing an unknown named Alex Stewart.
Tyson really letting the punches go, and that's it.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's it, brother.
A few months later, it was back to Las Vegas, where Tyson was expected to face his first real challenge since he lost the championship belt. As it turned out, Canadian Donovan Razor Ruddock wasn't much of a challenge. But the way the fight ended started a huge controversy. Just about everyone in boxing was enraged when the referee stopped the fight in round 3. A rematch was set up at the Mirage Hotel in Las Vegas, but Tyson's pre-fight antics seemed a foreshadowing of the trouble to come.
I come out of bed with girls to fight you.
There's something you can't buy in that class, and you don't got none of that.
You're sweet. Make sure you kiss me good with those big lips.
Tyson's image as a clown grew when he showed up at a press conference on a stretcher. There were reports he had thrown a toaster at Don King.
No, man, you threw the toaster at me, man. You know what I mean? I love you, Mike. You love me, Mike?
I love you.
All right. Did you see now? You understand that? Can you blink your little eyes?
Tyson won the rematch, but the Iron Mike magic was missing. One writer said Tyson looked like the oldest 24-year-old in the world. No one could know Mike Tyson was about to face an opponent that would knock him out of the ring for nearly 4 years, just about the same amount of time Muhammad Ali would spend on ice. Mike Tyson may have lost some of his sparkle, but he was still bringing in big money. He was now in position to take back the title from Evander Holyfield. If he could, it would have been boxing's first $100 million fight. Don King told Tyson he wanted him to polish up his image before he took on Holyfield, and sent him to the Miss Black America pageant in Indianapolis. It was there that someone finally dealt Mike Tyson the blow he could not recover from. Her name, Desiree Washington. She was a contestant in the Miss Black America pageant. They went out on a date. She went back to Mike's hotel room and then charged Tyson with rape.
I was like, saying, no, get off me, please, get off me. And he was like, don't fight me. And the person was a lot stronger than I was, and he just did what he wanted. And I was saying, stop, please, stop. And he just didn't stop. And okay, now who's wrong?
Tyson told a grand jury the only thing he'd done wrong was not treating her nicely after the two had sex.
I said, I want to be me and you. I want to be with you alone. I said, I want you. You said, I want to be me and you alone. Yeah. I want you. Yeah. Okay, what did she say? She said, okay, just call me. Did you say anything else? No, I had to leave.
On February 10th, 1992, the jury of 8 men and 4 women found Mike Tyson guilty of rape. On March 26th, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison, 4 years suspended to be served on probation. Tyson seemed to take it in his stride.
Don can't tell Mike, I hired the lawyer that put you in jail. I hired Vincent Fuller. I hired the lawyer that all of the appeals court judges in Indiana said, Mike, we'll give you an appeal based on the ineptitude of Vincent Fuller. But unless you say that, Mike, we can't give you an appeal. Mike was very carefully programmed by Don to say, take responsibility, Mike. Show the world you're a man.
The big question, after spending years in prison, could Tyson ever manage a comeback in the ring? Many looked to the only other champ who managed a comeback after being forced out of the ring for very different reasons, Muhammad Ali. Ali had survived for 3.5 years by making public appearances, doing talk shows.
Ladies and gentlemen, the heavyweight champion of the world, to me, Muhammad Ali.
Opening a fast food chain and selling his autobiography.
Random House had no difficulty today getting 9 camera crews and about 100 reporters and photographers to a news conference to announce his autobiography.
When he finally got his chance to re-enter the ring in Atlanta against Jerry Quarry in October of 1970, it was only after a blistering political battle.
I've been off not 1 year, but 3.5 years with a 6-week notice with about the best and the fastest and the trickiest man around today. So we don't have too much time to write poems or make fun. It's all serious business now.
Ringside here from Atlanta, Georgia, where tonight there are 5,000 fans packed into this arena, anticipating a great fight, and primarily to see the return of a great heavyweight champion, Muhammad Ali, or as, of course, most all of you know him, Cassius Clay.
The fight would be a tribute to Ali's competitiveness and courage. He was, after all, still facing a lengthy jail term. Yet after 3 years and 9 months out of the ring, he still chose to fight a top contender to resume his career.
Combination by Clay. Corey is fighting back, but the cut has been opened. And Perez is calling for the doctor. Corey is upset about it. Got to kind of hold him back.
Ali, now determined to regain the title, picked the number 3 contender, Oscar Bonavena, as his next opponent. It went 15 rounds before Ali was able to knock him out.
1:30 left in the fight. Oh, that's left. Floyd him. It came from nowhere. Ali came through with a left. The crowd screaming. The first knockdown of the fight. He took the mandatory 8. And now Ali is
behaving like the old Ali. One more knockdown in this round, the fight is automatically over. Bonavina is running. If he goes down again, it's over. Ali is the knockout winner.
Then, in 1971, Ali faced the opponent who would be his greatest rival, Smokin' Joe Frazier, the undefeated heavyweight champ of the world.
I predict that when I meet Joe Frazier, this will be like a good amateur fighting a real professional. Joe Frazier don't dance and pop, jab and move and back up. He's just one like a machine, just steady coming, taking punches. It's a matter of time that he gets that old hook in.
As battles of the century go, this one is different. First, because both Ali and Frazier are champions and undefeated. Second, because no fight has ever had as heavy a show business side as this one.
Burt Lancaster, how you doing, Burt?
I think I'll stop him inside of 10 rounds.
Getting sick and tired of all this. Joe Frazier, the heavyweight champion of the world. Clumsy, ugly, flat-footed Joe Frazier. I'll show you what a real champion is. See, you don't have that ring fit. That's it. Okay. You got time. All right, Lance. Let me see.
The first of their 3 historic bouts was set for Madison Square Garden. It was called the Fight of the Century. Ali's purse was to be $2.5 million.
Main event, 15 rounds for the undisputed heavyweight championship of the world.
It was an epic battle lasting 15 rounds.
Frazier is not the easy target he used to be. He's bobbing and weaving all the time.
That Joe Frazier's got to be some kind of a man. Ali hit him with every combination he could think of. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times, but 5 or 6 times.
But Ali lost in a decision. It was the first loss of Ali's career.
You know, I've been always handing out the defeat, so now I'm defeated, and now I can see how other people felt. And when I do come back, if I ever do, I'll have more of a hunger or determination, which is something you lose in the intoxication of so-called greatness, and in the intoxication of being always victorious. You soon come to the point where you let your guard down.
Ali did win a personal victory when the U.S. Supreme Court voted unanimously to overturn his conviction for draft evasion. Although Ali was vindicated, the battle for him was still not over. Ali could never rest until he had fought his way back to the top again. He resolved to fight every boxer in the world to get another shot at the championship. Over the next 2 years, Ali would fight 13 times.
Do you think that Muhammad Ali will ever be heavyweight champion of the world again?
Well, I don't think he's ever stopped being that in my mind or in my eyes. But I'll tell you one thing, he will be heavyweight champion of the world again.
Now it was time to fight Frazier again for the championship. But before he agreed to the match, Frazier had to fight a new kid who wasn't supposed to give him any problems. The kid's name? George Foreman. Foreman knocked Frazier down to become the new champ. It began to look as though Ali would never get another shot at the title. During Mike Tyson's 4-year prison term, he converted to Islam. Tyson was resolved to doing his time with dignity, although others in the African-American community and elsewhere felt he had been railroaded by the system and his management.
From 80 to 88, every decision that was made for Mike resulted in something that was advantageous for Mike. As opposed to that, every decision made for Mike from 89 to the present adversely affected Mike. It was sad to see him walk back into the prison, walk back into the cell area, because I knew that he didn't have to be there.
Mike Tyson has been out of the ring for just under 4 years, almost the same amount of time Muhammad Ali was forced out in the late 60s and early 70s. Now he's ready to make his comeback, and if he does make it to the top again, he'll do it with Don King.
I also will confirm that Don King will continue to promote my fight. Don is the greatest promoter in the world, as we know.
And in the spring of 1995, he announced he'd return to the ring on August 19, 1995 in Las Vegas at the MGM Grand. His opponent would be Peter Hurricane McNeely.
The
it's beneath Mike Tyson's dignity to fight the likes of a Peter McNeely. He's a nice enough guy, but he can't fight. When Muhammad Ali was out for 3 years and 9 months for a totally different reason when he refused induction, when he came back, he didn't pick a McNeely for his fight. He picked Jerry Quarry. Jerry Quarry is the second-ranked heavyweight in the world. But what bothers me most about this Don King situation is it's disgraceful. It's beneath the dignity of Mike Tyson. It's bad for boxing.
Mike Tyson was beginning a journey that only one man in history had been able to complete. Even as he began it, he seemed to realize that comparisons would be made. People wondered how he would measure up to boxing's greatest champion. In 1973, Muhammad Ali's comeback chances looked doubtful. The new champion, George Foreman, was turning down all offers. It was only after another newcomer offered Ali and Foreman $5 million each that the fight would be scheduled. That newcomer was Don King. The fight was to take place in Zaire, Africa, in October '74. Ali called it a rumble in the jungle.
Last night, I had a dream. When I got to Africa, I had one hell of a rumble. I had to beat Tarzan's behind first for claiming to be the king in the jungle. My brothers, Muhammad Ali and George Foreman, we are happy to see you among us.
For Ali, the rumble in the jungle seemed like a homecoming. He was Africa's greatest hero, and he fed off the energy and faith of the people of Zaire. For Foreman, the event was a nightmare. He was uncomfortable in Africa, and while Ali would walk among the people, Foreman hired attack dogs to keep people away. When Foreman finally entered the ring for the fight, the champion was greeted by a blistering chorus of insults.